Well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 7. I cannot believe we are already talking about episode 7 of the Caring Neurologist with Dr. Sandeep Thakkar. Dr. Thakkar, it's episode 7. How did that happen?
I blinked and we're at 7. I don't know. It's just like my kids are growing. It's growing like everything's growing fast, going by fast. Who knows?
Well, it is like your kid because this is your own project. So
My
I
other
am
baby.
so happy to be hosting it with you. And for everyone who's just arrived, go listen to the other 6 episodes. But here with Dr. Sandeep Thakkar, we are talking about Parkinson and all the amazing things he does for Parkinson's patients and families. And today's episode is a spotlight on research and what is next for Parkinson's treatment. Is that right, Dr. Thakkar?
Yep. Today is all clinical research, understanding where it starts, why we get our medications, what's going on in the field. It's exciting times right now.
Yep, because research matters more than ever. So I'm going to start. Let's just dive in with this first question. Most people think of clinical care and research as separate words and separate worlds. But you've said that they must work hand in hand, the care and the research. Why is research such a critical piece of Parkinson's care today?
So it used to be thought that you would go just to the university to go get clinical research, and it was only be at that site that one would have to, try a new experimental medication. At the forefront of medicine evolving, it's always been the university as a standard and a pillar. But as someone like myself and us movement disorder specialists that are Parkinson's trained, we went to the universities. We've developed and understood the research protocols. We've worked with industry. And then now as we're in our own practices and we've developed the ability to work with industry, we've been able to set up our own research collaborations. And that way patients have more access to get in to try clinical therapies, new trials, things that are getting harder at the university level.
When you say new trials and clinical trials, some people think, well, that is not FDA approved. That is not something I should do. Why are those trials so important?
Yeah, so the FDA here in the United States sets certain guidelines that you have to have a certain amount of observational studies or interventional trials. And within the clinical trials, there'll be a phase 1 trial, which involves usually 20 to 100 people monitoring safety of a medication and a dosage. And then a phase 2 trial will then have certain guidelines of less than 100 people typically, where you're continuing to test for safety as well as effectiveness. And then we get into the phase 3 trials when we have a large group of participants that will confirm the efficacy of the therapy that's being offered. So in the world of Parkinson's, this is where we're monitoring patients for 40 weeks or a year or 2 years, and we're monitoring the side effects compared to the existing standards and seeing if it's actually making a difference. And then we can also then utilize post-marketing, or once the FDA approves the medication based on the first 3 trials, then we can follow through to see also, is the medication doing what it's supposed to do long term? But we're always having medications regulated. So even though it's in the trial phase or in the clinical phases, we as clinicians are learning what's beneficial for patients. Patients are getting first hand experience about what's new and available. And some medications will go through and some may not, but it's the opportunity to succeed in this disease state where we can maybe slow down the progression or offer therapies that other patients can't get access to. In the cancer world, for instance, we see that patients don't have an opportunity for treating leukemia or lymphoma. and all of a sudden there's a clinical trial that's available that would save their lives. So I believe that these clinical trials have a huge benefit for our patients.
I can see that you're very invested in clinical research. So not only you're involved with clinical research, but as we have been talking about for 6 episodes already, this is the 7th, you're also involved, and your day-to-day is treating patients. So what inspired you to take that extra step and stay engaged with new studies and innovations as well?
I think it's that clinical curiosity, the academic curiosity that makes us clinicians or a physician. I think when I was in training, you want to learn the clinical aspects, you want to be good at diagnosing, you want to be able to help people. And then in my practice, we see very difficult cases already. We see one of the largest population of Parkinson's in the nation, and we see from early disease state to very advanced stages. So we've been able to offer therapy, and it's been rewarding to help people. And at the same time, as people have tuned into previous episodes, they've heard about our stories about how people can manage their disease, they can still live their life well, they can still work and enjoy travel. But at the same time, the disease progresses and the medicines that we have are limiting as time goes on. So having that aspect for clinical research allows new opportunities. It offers patient success that I couldn't offer beforehand. And I think as a leader in the field, as I want to be, I want to continue to strive with my colleagues around the nation and around the world to offer patients that success, that future success that they deserve.
From where you are, from your front row seat, I know it's kind of weird to talk about Parkinson's and being excited about something, and it could sound weird, but I mean, you are doing so many things. And I want to know what areas of Parkinson's research you are the most excited about right now.
Well, there's different avenues that are exciting right now in the world of Parkinson's research. So first aspect is AI is going to be very much involved with helping with medications, figuring out repurposing of therapies that are used for maybe another disease state and how we could utilize it in Parkinson's. There may be experimental information that we have from something like cough medicine that could help Parkinson's disease, which actually there is a phase 3 clinical trial called Aspro PD because of a medication called Ambroxol that's not available in the United States, but it is used for suppressing coughing. And it may show some benefit in a certain disease state or mutation of Parkinson's called the GBA gene. And so there's exciting research that we can bring therapies from something else into our field. And as we are utilizing AI and that technology to find out what's the new therapies that are available, we're still also understanding what gene therapy is going to be also helping us for. There's a huge amount of information that's being gathered from something called the PD gene study, which we're a part of as of right now, where we're able to collect samples of blood from patients and get the 7 most common genes and see if a patient actually has one of those genes. So we could then modify the gene to either suppress that gene from creating abnormal proteins or slowing down the disease or even curing it. And its current stand form. So there's so much going on with also novel therapies. We're talking about new research that may be in a way like we're using stem cells right now, and that utility is still gathering a lot of information. So we're going to just see this boom in research, and right now being at the forefront of it, I think, is an exciting aspect.
You just mentioned AI, and I think for many people, AI is a synonym of ChatGPT and of robots. So when you say AI in research for Parkinson's, how is AI a part of research?
Well, I don't even think I can speak to that because I even probably have a limited amount of information about what actually AI is when it comes to research. But, pharmaceutical companies, the government are working with certain types of programs that we can even understand the molecular structure of a medication and understand how it can actually fit into receptors of the brain. It can model what the receptors are abnormal or the enzymes in the brain that are abnormal with Parkinson's, and then see if it can create medications that would also fit into those structures. It's looking at research that's been built up and seeing, well, this affects this type of protein and this affects this type of enzyme and this affects this gene. And maybe we see that everything is related to one. So for instance, with Parkinson's disease, it affects the GI system, the gut. So there's abnormal proteins in the gut that may not be functioning well. There could be medicines that we're using for gastroparesis or constipation or nausea that may help slow down some abnormal functions that are in the gut that may actually help Parkinson's. So understanding how those research and connect everything. Now, when there's hundreds of labs in, say, California for research, but then there's thousands within the United States, and then there's tens of thousands in the world. These research centers don't talk to each other necessarily. AI will also help bring them all together. So there's more than just bringing in data from a research paper, but bringing in intellectual information that's going around the world.
That's amazing. So can you walk us through a type of study you or your partners are involved in today? What's being tested? Why does it matter? Can you even talk about it, or is it something that you cannot talk about?
Well, there's some that I'm not involved with and some that I am. One that's very interesting is from Blue Rock Therapeutics. They're working on a therapy that was it's a phase 3 clinical trial, Expedite 2, and that's working on putting in certain types of investigational cell therapy, and it's using dopamine producing neurons that are coming from what we call pluripotent, which means they can be any type of stem cell. And it's using human embryonic stem cells that will mature into the dopamine cells for the brain of Parkinson's. And we can implant those to see if that's going to make a difference in the motor outcomes and help restore areas that have been affected or destroyed by Parkinson's disease. So that's something that's exciting. We were asked to be part of that study, so we have to involve a neurosurgeon, but at this moment in time, that's up to debate if we're going to be part of that. There's also another study that's called the c-Abl inhibitor protein. It's a misfolded protein that creates alpha-synuclein, or an abnormal protein that spreads and creates the Parkinson's disease state. So if we can suppress that Abl tyrosine kinase, that's believed to be one of the biological processes in Parkinson's, then we can slow down the neurodegeneration of the disease. The other current investigational studies that we're part of right now is the PD gene study, where we're collecting samples from patients, blood samples, and patients are coming in to get tested, and then they're getting information for themselves to know if they have the GBA gene, the LRRK2 gene, the Parkin gene, PINK1 gene, and there's 7 genes that we're testing for. So there may be, again, future research for all of these if you have one of the genes. Right now, there's 2 investigational studies going on that patients who we've found to have the genes are actually enrolled in, that may slow down the disease progression. So we may have even cures for patients in the coming years. That's, I think, going to be the most phenomenal aspect at this time. And the other aspects of clinical research that we're part of is a tavapadon study, which is a dopamine agonist, and it is a special D1, D5 receptor agonist, which allows the brain to coordinate dopamine in a different way, has less side effect profiles than the medications that are currently available, and it can maybe, again, restore motor function to help patients.
That's really astonishing. I think you are one of the smartest people I've ever talked to, and I believe your vision for the future is very important. So I hear you talking about Parkinson's, and for I don't know how you do it, but you actually make everything sound exciting, even though it's not the best diagnosis. But when I listen to you, I feel like, okay, there is hope. Um, so what do you think will define the next era of Parkinson's care? Is it is it gene therapy or AI powered tools? Is it earlier detection? Is it something else?
So the next era of PD therapy, therapeutics, however we want to look at it, I think there's two aspects right now. One is going to be gene therapy. So as we're collecting genes to know which are causing abnormal proteins that cause the degeneration of the brain in these certain areas, I think that's going to be the forefront. We're going to see that in the next 2 to 5 years really exploding, and we're going to see that what we've already collected right now from blood samples is that 13 to 15% of patients with Parkinson's actually have the gene. So we thought it was anywhere from 5 to 10%, but we actually are getting value data right now that says it's about 13 to 15% of Parkinson's patients are having the disease due to genetics. That means the rest is all environmental. So that's important for us to then also do research on biomarkers. So collecting other types of understanding, whether it's from the saliva or if it's from looking at, the retina, or if we're looking at cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid that's within the brain and the spinal canal. So if we are able to get even skin samples and other blood tests to then say these people are more at risk, then we can start even further research on something to slow down the disease before it's progressed to the brain. Because again, as you know, Ursula, Parkinson's is not a disease that starts in the brain. It gets to the brain. And so, as we've commented before on the other podcasts, is that it's a disease that starts in the gut, and alpha-synuclein, which is an abnormal protein, does spread its way from the GI system, from the peripheral nerves of the GI system, and works its way up the vagus nerve and other pathways to get to the brain eventually.
I did not know that. Wow. So, okay, let's dig into that because I think a lot of people didn't know that. So, how does it progress? Where does it begin? And how long does it take until it reaches the brain?
So the brain and the spinal cord are called the central nervous system. And then all the nerves that are attached to whether it's the cranial nerves from the brain or it's the nerves that come from the spinal cord, those are called the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system, as it's attached to, whether it's the heart or if it's attached to the gut, it can somehow uptake or get destroyed by different cells that we call alpha-synuclein. And these abnormal proteins that are spreading, they'll work their way up, and they basically, kind of like an infection or virus, they'll work their way to the brain. So it's kind of like a slow version. Parkinson's is a slow version of mad cow disease. And this is actually in the 1970s, clinical physician and researcher Stanley Prusiner came up with this hypothesis and believed that, again, Parkinson's is what's called a proteinopathy. So it's a disease state of proteins that spread. And he was actually ridiculed at that time for his thoughts because it was unfathomable that could happen. But again, it is what's called a proteinopathy, and these alpha-synuclein cells become Lewy bodies that then spread.
Wow. I'm writing down as you speak because it's so interesting and there's so many things we need to understand. I could talk to you forever. But so you mentioned at one point you wanted to build a research hub with your practice. So let's think into the future. What would that research hub look like, and how would it serve patients differently?
Well, I'm hoping that again, it's just more for access for patients. People can come in, they can look on their phone, they can look at, Michael J. Fox Foundation or the Fox Trial Finder, they can look on clinicaltrials.gov, and they could see where locally they can find clinical research going on for Parkinson's. And these are the normal avenues. Even the Parkinson's Foundation has on their website clinical trials, and patients could easily just say, look, I'm interested in what's going on. And what they would do is contact each site. They can walk on in. Maybe there's pamphlets and information that they can learn about for clinical trials. That we would offer. Patients who come into our clinic would also have the same opportunity. They would, want to know what's going on in the field. And we would want kind of a one-stop shop for all of these options of patients, that it's not just the medications that are current, but what could help them for the future. But patients do need to do their homework. I think that's an important thing. You can't just assume that you can be part of a clinical trial just like that. There's a lot of important considerations to take into hand. And so each person does need to do their own homework. You have to also check with whether it's the clinical trial site or if it's with your physician. What are the study details? It takes time. Like, you actually have a commitment. You'll be following with the clinical study site for weeks or months, and coming in every so many weeks to see, again, how the effect of a medicine is, maybe drawing blood tests. There could be a situation that maybe you have surgery being planned, and so you don't want to be doing a clinical trial, or maybe you have other health issues that are going on with your one's diabetes or hypertension, so you don't want to be mixing and matching a new clinical trial. Some people may have deep brain stimulation, as episode 6 talks about deep brain stimulation, that we implant electrodes to help stimulate areas of the brain to coordinate the hands, the legs, speech, and maybe help balance. Some patients are excluded from clinical trials because they have deep brain stimulation, because their symptoms look so well controlled that you can't tell if a new therapy is actually slowing down the disease or improving, because deep brain stimulation already has marked responses.
You just mentioned something that I think is so important and that some people forget. Of course, we trust doctors, and of course, we do what they say, or what you guys say. But you just mentioned the homework that the patients have to do. And I think it's very important to empower patients to ask, to do their research, to go on Google, not obsessively, but actually to take matters into their own hands and not just let the doctor tell them what to do. I mean, confront the fact that doctors know more than us regular human beings do does not mean that we have to blindly follow. I mean, we should be empowered to ask questions.
Of course. Yeah.
And I believe that is a very important it's part of the core of what you do, is empowering patients.
Yeah, I think, as a clinician, you have signed up to take care of patients. You're signed up. You had an oath that you want to protect them. You want to guide them. You don't want to do no harm. And sometimes with clinical trials, you could be scared to enroll patients, or patients aren't aware and they think everything is scary when it comes to clinical trials. And we don't know potentially what side effects can happen from new purpose or repurposed medications, right? But at the same time, we want to offer patients, when they're in a limited aspect for future success, something like Parkinson's, you get trapped in a corner, and then as it's progressing, we can't do the things we need to do. This isn't dealing with just kind of like a common cold or flu, right? Like, this eventually becomes debilitating for some, that they can't walk well, have a difficulty with sleep, they have difficulty maintaining relationships, whatever it may be. They don't want to feel like their loved one wants to be a caregiver to them. So, having the opportunity to be successful and earlier in the disease state also makes a big difference. And so it is important to be empowered. It's important to ask questions. I ask our patients to always email me, or give me a summary about what's going on up until their visit, or bring a list of questions, what's transpired since our last visit, so that I can start thinking through what I can offer them. But this is the other thing, Ursula, is that being part of the clinical world and the research world now, I can start saying, okay, well, we're limited here. Why don't we have this as an option before you go into our higher level care of like surgeries?
I want to talk about a bit about the power of physician-led research. It's not a surprise that pharma often gets a bad reputation for being disconnected from patients. So, as a physician, you are working with patients directly. And since the human side is clearly so important to you, what do you wish more companies understood about people living with Parkinson's, about the situation?
The companies that I deal with when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, it's a partnership. And I think that there was this institutional concern from the university level that there's an influence from pharma. And also maybe there was more historical issues that were going on with the FDA. At this moment in time, I mean, if you think about it, who puts our politicians in office? It's the pharma companies. So I think that, the insurance companies do the same thing. And all of these big businesses have influence, and money brings in these politicians that make the rules that they themselves may not follow. And so even to me as a clinician, we used to get pens that would have the name of a drug on there. And that's been taken away because somehow as a clinician, we'll be influenced by having a pen, and we're reminded of the same drug that, that we're using to write a prescription for. I think it's gotten foolish when it comes to that because it's been a self-imposed institutional thought process that pharma is bad. And I don't think that's always the case. I get to work with some amazing companies. There's a company, Amneal, that I'm working with right now. And they donated over $1 million back into Parkinson's research and also to Parkinson's care and to help certain funding. We see this all the time where, number one, to create a clinical trial, it costs millions of dollars to set that up and perform. So yes, pharmaceutical company can make millions on top of it and maybe billions, but at the same aspect of it, when you look at hand in hand, they're investing into it. There's no guarantees. And so what I have the opportunity is to bridge patient care with something that is evidence-based, and we're providing information, we're providing therapies, and I get a partnership that I wouldn't be able to utilize to help those that come into our office.
That is so important. And I believe that trying to make amends with big pharma is an important part of everything right now for you physicians and for patients as well. So since you have an everyday relationship with patients, and you know what Parkinson's patients need and what they're going through because you are the one talking to them, big pharma is not. So for companies or researchers who are listening, what makes a neurologist like you a valuable partner in advancing Parkinson's breakthroughs? I know it's hard to talk about oneself, but I think it is important for these people to understand why your job is so important.
Yeah, I would say, number one, we set ourselves apart. And I say we again. I have a great team that's around us. We have our physician assistants that are working with me. They're Parkinson's trained. They've been doing this for 8+ years. They've been in the realm of taking care of patients when it's been the emotional aspects of it, when it's the cognitive issues, when it's not just the physical aspects. So our team, including myself, we we understand each patient individually. We're focused as a Parkinson center, as an institute. And what we're able to do is, because we see such a high volume of patients that come with Parkinson's, we can offer them very specific care. If I was a general neurologist and I saw neuropathy and stroke and epilepsy, someone who comes from industry and wants to do clinical research for Parkinson's, it may be 10% of my practice. We're 99% of our practice is Parkinson's and essential tremors and other movement disorders. So we are, in fact, a big hub where centers want to come. We actually have a higher patient volume than most universities, even in our area. And fortunately, I think what makes us very special is that we've partnered with other neurologists that are independent like myself around the nation. And so right now we have 4 sites that we're doing research with in Boca Raton, in New York, in San Francisco area, and then here in Orange County. And we've developed a partnership led by Dr. Stuart Isaacson. He's also helped empower us as clinicians, and we work together, and he's developed relationships with the industry and then getting us research so that we can be even more empowered.
I know you have to go work with your patients, but I do want to ask you one more question. I know it's a very broad question, and I don't know if there's only one answer. But I'm curious because you speak about your job and you speak about what you do and your face lights up. I'd love to know what you'd say the best part of your job is.
Best part of my job. Wow. I don't know if I can say I have a best part of my job. I have a lot of different aspects of my day that make it rewarding and fun. I don't go into my office and I drive in thinking like I'm going in for a job. Like, this is part of my work. I mean, you and I started getting on this call, at 5 a.m, and I got a full day of clinic, but I'm still feel like I'm going to be energized. The aspects of what I do is not just starting at like 8 o'clock check-in and a check-out at 5 o'clock. So, I think I'm rewarded because I think we have a higher purpose. I think that makes a big difference. I think faith that my family has instilled in me. I think that the faith that my team has, I work with some amazing people who are willing to sacrifice to help others. I got my family, my wife, and my kids that make my job a career. They trust me, they empower me, and I think I look forward to going to work because I know that there's a purpose, and that purpose I think is it's hard to quantify what that is, but again, I just truly am blessed with what I get to do. I think karma is a big deal, and our belief system, being Hindu, is also a big part of what you do to others and how you treat others. Going by the golden rule is a big part of this. So I'm hoping that as hard as I work, I get to enjoy the benefits of it.
Dr. Thakkar, it's been a pleasure. I am looking forward to episode number 8. I am learning so much. I know everyone's learning a lot. I write down, I have notes. I write down everything you say. It's always a pleasure. Is there any message you want to leave people with before the next episode?
Well, we've built up a good library of podcasts now, and get into all of them. If you haven't experienced the Caring Neurologist, please check in. Please see what's been missing. Spread the word. I think we've been excited about what we've been able to work together with. So I appreciate you. Thank you for the questions and bringing this podcast to life as well. And I think it's just an honor to be part of this. So just patients get on the podcast, spread the word, go to clinicaltrials.gov, understand research, do your homework, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much.